Hi, this is Gary Auden. I'm bringing you an Educast, 3 steps to future-proof your Nortel investments. And with me today is Hardy Myers, President and CEO of AVST. Someone's been in the business a long time and really influential in the market. But before we begin, let's discuss what we're going to discuss. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We have a number of talking points here, and we're focusing this on the Nortel customer, but also the VAR that has a Nortel customer, all right, the consultant who has a Nortel customer, because the problem is not unique just to the end customer. First of all, what about UC, Unified Communications, the trends and the influencers? Next, talking about compliance concerns for Nortel customers and how we move forward to those. Enhancing your environment because you're going to be moving into Unified Communications. You don't have a choice. And how do you future-proof what you already own? Because a lot of people who are listening own a lot of resources that are still worthwhile and working, but they'd like to extend them. So Hardy, let's start off with what's the traditional functions we have and how is Unified Communications enhancing those functions?
Great. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, so this is a really nice slide. I think it summarizes clearly, kind of the traditional stack of UC functionality on the left. And then you can see some of the key trends, or in some cases what people refer to as mega trends, that are driving the adoption of Unified Communications forward in the middle. And then on the right, really this is just to highlight and sort of re-emphasize for everybody that, in fact, what we're trying to do, and what we've always been trying to do with communications, with advanced communications, with new capabilities of communications, is to improve the productivity of the workforce. And we at AVST break that down into 3 kind of silos. 1 is individual productivity, 2 is team productivity, and then 3 is really enterprise or business productivity. And what we try to do as a company, as a unified communications solution provider in the space, is deliver capabilities that address all 3 of those silos of productivity within an enterprise, if you will.
This market, though, is actually very large. Would you discuss some of the metrics, please?
Sure. It is a very large market, you're right. And of course what's going on is the market itself is about a $40 billion annual spend market globally. And the real interesting part of the story is, what's happening, quote, under the covers relative to spending patterns. And what we're seeing, of course, and you've seen this, and I'll talk about this in just a minute when we get to some of the cloud slides, but what you're seeing is a material shift of spend, of end-user spend, from premise-based spend to cloud-based spend. In fact, statistically, these metrics from Gartner highlight the fact that they're forecasting an increase in the spend, or a shift in the spend, I should say, from 15% to almost 40% of the UC spend by 2020 is going to be on cloud. And within that, sort of overall $40 billion bucket, one of the largest buckets is the telephony and messaging, which, as going back to the previous slide, are 2 of the core capabilities of, in the Unified Communications stack. And that adds up to be about a $13 billion spend that's going to be cloud-centric by 2019. So it's pretty material.
Let's go into that cloud question, because the point of this slide is there's a tipping point we're coming to, and it may be right now. How's it going to affect this business?
Well, it's really interesting, and it depends on which part of the business you talk about. But here what we have, as you can see, is yes, the tipping point is projected to be next year, and then what you see is that the actual, within this element of the $40 billion, so this is what, 21 billion of the 40, that more than half of the spend will be targeted at cloud in the near term, meaning within the next 24 months or so. Sorry, excuse me, by 2019. So this is pretty material. Now, what's interesting is, and as you well know, is that the base will be predominantly premise even out through the 2019-2020 time. And of course, the consumption in aggregate on enterprise specifically, meaning medium and large enterprise, will continue to be by 2020 about a 70-30, meaning premise versus cloud spend. So the point is that premise still remains a very, very important part of the actual spend, and that customers are looking for solutions that, depending on where they're at and what they want to do, if they're still in premise mode, they want to be able to, they want to be able to go to vendors that can deliver, all the different capabilities, meaning whether it's premise or it's hybrid or it's cloud. They want to be able to hear a story that talks about all three of those delivery methods.
Well, let's talk about those methods. Go back a little bit to 2004. This has been an evolving environment, not simply something that just came on the market today.
That's absolutely correct. And what you saw starting really almost a decade ago is the emergence of small cloud providers targeting the SMB space. And that market is really accelerating today, and you're seeing a significant amount. I'll highlight some of those on another slide here in a minute. Some of the vendors that are sort of coalescing or converging on that SMB space. And then, it started to move, and what you're seeing is that as that space gets more congested, suppliers, vendors are now moving up into and trying to address the needs of medium businesses, and of course now and of course adoption's accelerating in medium, and now what you're seeing is starting to see mid and large enterprise adoption picking up. And I can speak, from our perspective, what we've seen in the last year is quite a significant increase in the amount of conversations we're having with customers. In fact, we just launched our cloud solution set literally this month, which is very exciting. And of course, we've always been, delivering private cloud, which is, essentially enterprise data center configuration, and now we'll be able to deliver our solutions from the public cloud, if you will, partnering with an infrastructure as a service partner to deliver that technology.
I think the next slide is important to review because there's more than one way you can get into UC. In fact, 4 different ways, and they compete with each other.
That's absolutely true. This is why interoperability is such a critical part of the story for any medium and large enterprise customer, because you have 4 different vendor categories converging on UCaaS, or Unified Communications as a Service, and in all likelihood, what an enterprise is going to have is going to be a combination of different technology from various of these vendors, and they're going to need to be able to put it all together, and it's of course going to run on somebody's rails, if you will, which is typically a service provider. There's going to be a service provider involved in the conversation from delivery of bandwidth, etc., connectivity. So yeah, in all likelihood, you're probably going to end up with over the course of the next few years, several of these vendors as making up your Unified Communications as a Service solution set, or your Unified Communications solution set, which could be a combination of both premise and cloud, or it could be a pure play sort of scenario. And of course, what you have, like with some of the incumbents, or with all the incumbents, I should say, them all moving towards a very well thought out premise, hybrid, and cloud delivery model. Whereas most of the pure play guys, or the pure play vendors, they really don't think about the premise part of the world. They're more interested really in, kind of what they view as the future, which is a pure cloud scenario. I personally, and based on all the spending that you see out there with spending forecasts, I should say, with medium and large enterprise, it's clear that, as I said previously, premise will remain a very, very significant element of the spend. And so we think that the best model, and we think that the model that enterprises are most attracted to, medium and large enterprises, is one that allows them to, any delivery model, any consumption model. How would you like it, sir? and then enable that customer to evolve or change if they decide in the future that they want to go to a different delivery model.
You've used the term hybrid, and sometimes people say hybrid is going to die. Some say hybrid is the only way to go. What do you think is going to happen in the next few years?
Yeah, well, and of course this is Gartner data here, but and Gartner, I think, as you would agree, they're pretty well informed. Specifically with medium and large enterprise, they talk to thousands of medium and large enterprise. I don't work for Gartner, so I'm not promoting Gartner, but my point is they tend to be pretty well dialed in on the medium and large enterprise IT issues and opportunities, and so they themselves are forecasting hybrid to be something that in fact is the preferred model over the next 4 years. And I would agree with that. We see just a significant, and it really has to do with migration of workloads to the cloud to a certain extent. And I'll give you a simple example of that. If you think of a large enterprise, you've got an email infrastructure, you've got a telephony infrastructure, you have a collaboration infrastructure, And it's very difficult for, you have a messaging infrastructure, it's very difficult for those customers to do a big bang, meaning all that stuff moving to the cloud at one time. And even if they wanted to do that, it's just probably not logistically possible. So I do see clearly whether they're going to evolve some workloads or all the workloads to the cloud, some sort of hybrid configuration over the next few years, because the truth is, what everybody, going back to that original slide that we talked about, that at the core, the mission of unified communications is to help improve, enterprise productivity, that they're always going to be trying to add enhanced capabilities in the near term while they're effecting the evolution of the various workloads.
That brings up a point that I hear some pundits talking about voice is dead. Others say, well, we're going to do chat and texting, but yet I think voice is going to continue for a while. What are your observations?
I would say that for medium and large enterprises, and again, part of my answer is it's very age of workforce specific. In other words, although I'm not sure that I have millennials myself as children, and we are very, AVST is very interested and focused on watching the evolution of the workforce, and different members of the workforce, different ages, have different needs and different interests and different requirements. Bottom line is, I don't see us going backwards, meaning I don't think we're going back to kind of regressing from where we are today. I think we're going to evolve from where we are today and enhance what we've done already. And a good example of that is, as you mentioned, is messaging. Originally it was voice messaging, then it became unified messaging, and now we have text messaging, and we have chat, and we have all these other different modes of messaging. But that doesn't mean that the old methods are not appropriate, and for certain actual business processes, they're actually mission critical. And in most medium and large enterprises today, voice applications, whether it's the actual call processing, the routing of the calls, or the taking the messages and routing of the messages, or escalation, or IVR type functionality, remains mission critical. And I do not see that changing. I see it could evolve. A good example of that on say call processing or automated attendant is replacing a touch tone automated attendant with speech, which is a much more natural interface for mobile workers, right, when you're driving. And however, I do not see us evolving away from this concept of centralized call routing and then distribution and issues we solved years ago and had tremendous productivity improvements. I don't see that going away. I see, as I said, I see that getting enhanced through advanced capabilities like speech, or perhaps multimodal messaging, where you're taking a message via voice and then you're transcribing it and shooting it to somebody in text, things like that. It's not a good time to lock in on a single vendor because, frankly, given the four categories of vendors converging on the communication cloud space, you're probably you could be at a disadvantage.
Now that brings up the point. A lot of our audience is interested in the Nortel Communication Server 1000, and it's reliable, it's functional, it works, but they'd like to extend it. What's your comment there?
Yeah, so I think we're going to talk about this shortly on a couple of other slides, but the bottom line is, the Nortel infrastructure. I mean, Nortel was one of the premier providers of enterprise-grade telephony technology, and many customers over the years have invested in that infrastructure, and that infrastructure still continues to serve them well. And there's no question that their plan in the future is to evolve to something else, because, practically speaking, Nortel doesn't exist now. Avaya, of course, which bought Nortel, has some great evolutionary opportunities to move forward with their communication manager and their IP office technology, and of course, NEC's got great technology that a customer could move to, and Mitel, Microsoft, etc. So, but the bottom line is, as I said, kind of alluding back to the mega trends, I think a lot of customers are not sure exactly what they're going to do in the near term, and so what they are doing, as you mentioned, is, or what we're advising them to do, is really approach this from a real sort of strategic manner, and think about where you're going, what you want to address, and where are there opportunities to add or improve productivity, given that you may not want to change that infrastructure in the near term.
I like this timeline next because it demonstrates to people there's been a good evolution for the CS1000, but it hits a termination point because of several different reasons. You want to talk about some of the timeline problems?
Yeah, so the CS1000 itself, again, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have a great asset like a CS1000 and have it become crippled or the investment timeline jeopardized by virtue of parts that may need to be addressed. In this case, we're highlighting one of these, which is, and I'm not saying that there are or there aren't other ones, but this one is clearly one where you've got a call pilot, which was their voice application platform that was attached to the CS1000, and it was running on Windows Server 2003, which has now been end of support, and some people say end of life, but end of support for over a year. And so what you really have with this, and this is very, very important for businesses in regulated industries, hospitals, things like that, healthcare chains, where you have compliance issues. This is a pretty significant risk, and we're highlighting this as one of the areas which, by not addressing this one component in the CS1000 reference architecture, if you will, what you end up with is potentially jeopardizing the future timeline of your CS1000 investment. So we're advocating, of course, not surprisingly, that we at AVST bring a really great solution to solve this problem, which is an immediate near-term problem. We're seeing a tremendous amount of interest from customers and prospects on addressing this issue, and people are getting around to it. And what I mean by that is, it's quite funny. It's when you talk to customers and they say, well, what we have has worked really, really well for many, many years, and we cannot get budget or focus on replacing this particular piece of our infrastructure today, our UC infrastructure today. And when you then change that conversation from a, hey, you need to replace this voice application platform, to, hey, you have a major security and compliance risk, it's, most CIOs, most CTOs today have budget, a lot of budget, frankly, to address these type of issues, and we see these move to the top of the list very quickly, because this is the way you need to think about it. This isn't about changing a voice application platform. It's not just about that. It's about addressing a security and compliance issue.
If I go back to the title of our EduCast, the title had 3 steps in it. What are the 3 steps you're talking about that people have to go through?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because we've put a lot of time and thought into this, and we don't. Yes, obviously AVST would like to sell customers technology, but at the end of the day, we're more interested in developing a long-term relationship with customers, and so we think that the best way to do that is to take an advisory role. And when we step back and we thought about what customers that have Nortel products or Nortel investments would want to think about is how do I extend, meaning deal with short-term issues? How can I enhance, meaning add new, productivity, advanced capabilities, UC capabilities, and then set me up so that I can evolve in a orderly fashion, I guess is the way to say it. And so that's what we really came up with, this concept of a 3E strategy: extend, enhance, and evolve. And I'll talk about each one of those a little bit more as we highlight some of the capabilities of the AVST solution set.
Now, you're talking about AVST, but why do people buy AVST?
Well, that's a really good question. It's usually 1, 2, or all 3 of these reasons here. First and foremost, it's we meet some requirement they have today, and so we talked about the mission criticality of voice applications, and that the larger the enterprise, the more mission critical this technology tends to be. And then, of course, this concept of I'm not ready to make a change on my call control or my voice platform yet, and I have this short-term issue, a la Windows Server 2003, and a support issue, which is driving a compliance issue. I need to deal with that now, and the technology that is running on that end of support platform is in fact mission critical. So that's number 1, and there's nobody that does that better than AVST on the market, and we've literally done it for thousands and thousands of customers worldwide, and we continue to have just many conversations with customers about addressing this near-term issue. But what customers find out, and they're very pleased to find out, is when they get into the conversation with AVST, is that there's much more to this platform than they actually I think, probably thought or expected. And so what that leads to is really that more important, or as important, I should say, element of our solution set, which is not only are we going to solve your short-term problem, and that's going to be a mission-critical solution, but we're going to allow you to start deploying some of these really, really powerful best-of-breed solutions, UC capabilities that you've actually, frankly, seen and wanted, but you thought because you had a Nortel CS1000 platform you couldn't deploy today because you would have to buy a whole new call control platform or a PBX or an IP PBX or a cloud solution to get those capabilities. And in fact, the answer is you don't need to do that. So we, and what we've really worked hard on at AVST is to make those capabilities consumable by the end user on an a la carte basis. So if you're a large organization or a large enterprise and you only need, mobility and speech-enabled, personal assistant for 100 or 10% of your workforce, you can do that. If you want to deploy our informal call center solution for, one or two of the teams, on your university campus, you can do that. If you want to create, or if you want us to create, I should say, or leverage all the business process, communication-enabled business process solutions we've done in the past to create some really powerful business process integrations, communication-enabled business process integrations on your in your organization, we can help you with that. And then the third reason, and this is, of course, as equally critical given everything we talked about, is, set me up so that I can evolve when I'm ready to my digital future, which typically looks like, as we've talked about, some sort of cloud element. It's clearly going to have mobility in it. It's going to be IP-centric, and it's probably going to have Skype for Business, some element of the Skype for Business solution stack in it as well.
You haven't used the word, but the word transformed is really what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And what we find with enterprises, and it's really a great day when this happens, is, first and foremost, what customers need, as I said, is you got to meet their current needs. So give me what I had, and then put me on a path to really transforming my enterprise. And that's what our entire mission at AVST is about, developing communication solutions that transform the enterprise, and that's what we've been doing, literally for 3 decades. And so, here, if you just boil down the AVST solution set, there's really 4 areas that we help enterprises transform themselves. And what we find when we have this conversation with these silos of capability, there's someone in the room on the IT team that would like to talk about any one of these, meaning there's always someone that wants to talk about one of these items. And so it's not just a voice conversation, it's probably a mobility conversation, there may be a business process conversation, and of course interoperability is always top of mind with all enterprise IT teams. And then from a delivery model standpoint, really they want to know that they can deploy it on premise today, or they can deploy it on cloud today, and they can change their mind, and they may need a hybrid configuration. So, our vision at AVST was, first and foremost, really get clear and design and deliver these really best-of-breed UC solutions in these silos, if you will, or these elements of the UC stack, but then more importantly, or as importantly, evolve the delivery methods such that we were meeting customers' requirements, any consumption model, any delivery model.
The point I think that's most important, the strongest point you have, is the word interoperability, because you're not saying you solve everybody's problem, but you can connect to an awful large range of other resources.
That's absolutely correct. We strive to and consider ourselves experts in interoperability and communication interoperability, if you will, or enterprise interoperability. And we worked very, very hard over the years to continue to meet the challenge from medium and large enterprises that have all these different brands. And it's not unusual for a medium and large enterprise to have, say, half the organization on NEC and half the organization on Avaya, and they want to go ultimately to a single centralized, for example, NEC call control infrastructure, and they need a path to be able to do that. And the interoperability of the AVST, or the interoperability layer, a solution set of the AVST platform, enables them to be able to migrate to whatever that future is in a orderly, natural fashion. Because when you're talking about 10, 20 sites that may all have disparate technology, you need some sort of vehicle, if you will, to enable that migration, and AVST does a really, really nice job of helping customers do that.
I like the word bridge that you put on the next page, because what you're really talking about is bridging across multiple providers into one common platform element that you're trying to deliver.
Exactly. And, for a lot of customers, Microsoft is their future. And when I say that, I mean they've probably deployed Skype for Business on-prem as an instant messaging client, and they're quite keen or interested in pursuing the Microsoft call control infrastructure. And again, AVST through our interoperability and our partnership with Microsoft, we've developed a set of solutions, interoperability solutions, that enable that. And then, of course, in areas where perhaps the AVST functionality is, deeper and richer because of our 3 decades of development and focus in the space, we enable and we augment a Microsoft deployment to enable it to be a, really large enterprise-ready solution set. And customers have embraced that really positively over the last year.
Let's summarize what you talked about.
Yeah, great. So the key takeaways for our listeners: number one, we would recommend it's imperative that you address short-term security and compliance issues within your infrastructure, whether it's Nortel or not. And the way to do that, and the quickest, most efficient way, is to attack, or shall I say, attach to your security budget, your compliance and security budget, and try to move the project priority up where it might not otherwise, be getting the attention that it needs, because this is a critical issue. 2, you can get on your path to advanced UC solution set while you figure out what you're going to do from a call control standpoint in the near term, and we deliver a whole series of best-of-breed UC capabilities. And again, this is in our areas of the UC stack, we do this. There are other vendors that do it in other elements of the UC stack. So, but for medium and large enterprises, there's no question that adding best-of-breed capabilities, particularly as you're evolving infrastructure, is really a great way to start improving the productivity of your organization in the near term, and not waiting for the quote big bang, which may or may not happen at some point down the road. We think it's really a smart move to invest in operability to future-proof your infrastructure, and we don't see enterprises ending up with a single vendor, frankly, ever, because as the CIO changes, the appetite and interest in certain new technologies changes, and therefore, given the magnitude of the investments that an enterprise has made, you're going to have, frankly, probably a change in direction. And so you're going to have, if you will, sunk investment in legacy or previous approved tech investments, and you're going to have to add stuff to that because you're not going to see a huge rip and replace given the magnitude of the investment. And then, from my perspective, decide on what matters to you in the cloud. There's a lot to that point, but what I mean by that is first of all, can you do cloud? And when I mean cloud, what I mean is, can you do public cloud? So can you put your data in the cloud, or can't you? And how much of your UC stack do you want to consume from the cloud? What workloads are moving to the cloud first, and do you have a plan to connect your on-prem to your cloud, to the cloud, et cetera? So those are all things that starts with security and I guess I would say enterprise appetite for public cloud, and you have to be real clear. It's best to be real clear on that before you go down too many paths relative to your enhanced unified communications adoption.
You've talked about an awful lot, and it's really nice that you have these other resources on this page here. 5 steps of future-proofing, what's next for Nortel customers, about the blog, about the call pilot, so people can learn more after we finish this Educast. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time, Hardy, and these are the contact points you have for AVST.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.